pro promotion relegation thing is fundamentally a scam to make it work the way the EPL does. Talking about that and about how ways Major League Soccer or U.S. soccer can support these other clubs. The only reason why anybody supports that is because we have a deplorable history of teams coming and going in the soccer landscape. It's not like there's any permanence to any of these things. The only way to create permanence, is if you artificially keep them alive. Frankly, I don't want to keep a Rhode Island something alive using resources that may be able to go somewhere else if they're only drawing 100 people a game. That's not the idea behind promotion and relegation. Let's be real. MLS in 30 years is the most successful soccer league in U.S. history, period. It's not even comparable.
Kylian Mbappe could have never played football if he grew up in the U.S., in my opinion.
Being from the States, you have to learn how things are over there because MLS is much different than the Premier League, and you're almost stepping into a different realm.
With the 2026 World Cup coming here and a new generation of fans start to become to discover the game, there's no telling where the game's going to be 10, 15, 20 years.
One game changed my life, and that's all it ever takes.
Who you see on your screen today, he's a coach, a referee, a content creator, a vlogger, a hat collector extraordinaire. I am really, really excited to have SimpleCoach, aka Paul Marc Oliu, on the show today. Paul, I'm excited that we're doing this finally. I feel like it's been quite some time. How are you?
Doing well, Jose. I have to say, I'm an admirer of all the work you're doing, GOLZtv, all of it, and the box to box is fantastic. So really do appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate the kind words. I think with box to box, we're definitely here to tell stories. It's the one content segment on GOLZtv that I feel like we get to go deeper beyond that surface level I feel like other shows just really aren't doing out there right now. And so that's why we're here, right? We're here to tell your story. You have a very interesting path. I would say when it comes to content creation, there are very few others out there like you, not just because of who you are as a person or the realm of soccer content that you create, but it's all just very unique. And I feel like you cater to a very specific audience on the broad spectrum of soccer content that exists here in North America. So I think our audience is going to tune right in and be here to learn. So before we jump into any of that story, let's go to the question that we always kind of kick things off with. Paul, who are you today?
Well, thanks for that, throwing that grenade my way. It's the one that I've been thinking about all day after watching all the box to boxes you've done. So who am I today? I don't know. I think I'd probably start out with I'm a dad, I'm a husband. That's the first in line, right? And man of faith, and I would say from a soccer perspective, I am a obsessive compulsive disorder soccer fan. I've been following the game since I was 8 years old, and I said it bit me. It was like a bug that bit me, and I haven't stopped since. So I get obsessed about things and I churn them in my mind until they're done. And I've been churning soccer in my mind since I was 8. So I'm now doing this YouTube thing and with around Division III soccer, and it is a great exploration into a game that gets overlooked, that gets ignored. Which part explains the journey to this, right? To where we are today. So I guess that's a good start, right? That's a good start to who I am.
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, and I am the employee of the chief dog officer who usually sits right there, but she's literally standing right here trying to get out the door. So hang on a second.
Go for it. You're good.
Sorry.
Chief dog officer, I love it.
Yeah, she's the boss of me. So she's definitely the boss of me.
In a lot of ways, we're definitely the employees of our little ones in any way, shape, or form. As someone who has animals and a 9-month-old in the house, I totally feel you on that. Well, look, I think you mentioned something right there that I think we'll touch on a lot in the show in general is how overlooked the content that you create
Mhm.
as a niche category within a category, so to speak,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We'll touch on it. College soccer to me is a special place in my heart, not just because I played once upon a time, but
Mhm.
I feel like there's tons of untapped
Oh.
talent and potential that gets overlooked every day, every
Yeah,
week,
yeah.
every month, right? So I'm kind of curious, before we jump into maybe your earliest memories, what's it like? I mean, right now, for those who are not aware of just the calendar of college soccer and kind of how it
Mhm.
works, right? We're out of season, right?
Yep.
Technically,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
national championships have moved on very recently.
Mhm.
At this time, as a content creator and just a fan of college soccer in general, I don't know, like what's it like covering the space right now when we're technically out of season?
I think just from the Division III perspective, coaches are always willing to talk. So interestingly enough, I just try to have conversations with coaches. Like I do a lot of interviews, right? Like, and whether it's with new coaches or coaches I've spoken to before, I could talk to them about the past season, how they did, their relative thoughts on the game. Um, and they're always willing to talk. Very few. I actually probably interviewed 150 some odd coaches in the game, right? Um, and I can only think of one where I made a request where somebody came back to me and actually said, "Yeah, that's not my thing." And
Mm,
so everyone else is more than gracious with their time. So I could do 4 or 5 interviews a week without, and it's not necessarily that hard. They're always willing. They want to talk about their programs. These guys and ladies put so much of who they are into these programs, college programs. And, people see the results on the field, and of course, everyone's an armchair critic. It always amazes me in this, I'll just say, in the space we're in, right? In the content creation space, like you have to almost be like a resident expert. And so there are guys who think they're resident experts about the game and just miss out on so much of what's going on that, that's the part that really intrigues me more than the soccer. But so I do that. That occupies a lot. There's
hmm
the season comes around very quickly, as I'm sure you're aware. It's like blink of an eye. And and then when I'm looking for things to do, I get, like I said, I have a little bit of OCD in me about some of these things. And I get into topics about the game that really make me think awfully too hard about it. And so I dive into that sort of thing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about D3. It sort of opened up an avenue to talk about other aspects of the game. And that's sort of what I do in the off season. And then during the season, I am just churning and burning through the games and watching way too much soccer in 3 months than I probably care to admit. But it's what I do. It's sort of what I enjoy, and as long as I enjoy it, that's how I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I don't think there's no such thing really as like too much soccer. I mean, from my perspective, right? There's like we're all sickos in some way, shape, or
Yeah,
form. But I will say this: I can imagine you probably watch more college soccer than most, if not all, right?
yeah,
And I have my own gripes about it. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. I feel like there's so much more that can be done to
oh,
bring
totally.
awareness to college soccer,
Yeah,
and it's crazy because so many there's such a massive opportunity for fans to tune in. So,
yeah,
and I would love at some point down the road in my lifetime to draw comparisons between college soccer and pro soccer, even, or let's just say the lateral equivalent of it in another sport, college football.
yeah, yeah,
Ah,
yeah,
man, I would love to be able to do that. We'll talk about it. I do have some hot
yeah.
takes there, but we'll start this show and kick it off the way that we always do. I think starting from the beginning, having this audience understand a little bit about where you've been, what you've seen, why you're so crazy about this game, and specifically from the lens of college.
Hmm.
I know soccer kind of bleeds through and touches almost every aspect of your life on a personal level.
Yeah.
But let's let the audience kind of hear that for themselves. So if we kick it back to just some of the earliest memories, I think it's going to be very eye-opening because you just lived through an era of the sport, the earliest days that most of us did not, right? Like when we
Yeah.
interviewed Mark Fishkin, getting to understand his perspective and his POV when soccer wasn't anywhere close to being as
Yeah.
accessible as it is today.
Yeah.
we're very, very privileged today in the age of the internet, but that hasn't always been the case. So let's kick it back to you, Paul, and maybe just kind of where you started with this. What kind of scratched your itch in the earliest of days, and what was it like being a fan of a sport that hardly anybody knew about?
Well, I have to start out to my first soccer memory, which happened when I was 8 years old. And my parents and I had just moved to Barcelona. I was a baseball kid. I started playing Little League baseball and was all into that. And, just like every other kid at the time. And we moved to Spain, and the nearest baseball stadium was the Olympic baseball stadium in a part of town. It was like an hour away. And I was like, I ain't doing that. Because of my hand-eye coordination and my inability to kick a ball, I didn't know you had to kick one. They asked me to be a goalkeeper for the school team, and we played one game that season, and it was, I think we were winning 1-0. They had a penalty kick, and I actually made the save on the penalty kick by catching the ball between my legs. As weird as that sounds, I slid like I was in baseball, and I caught it between my legs. So that's the first. And ever since then, I kid you not, the bug, right? Like,
Hooked.
and it's been soccer has been, I forgot about baseball. It's been through and through. So I went to college, played college ball, went back to Europe, tried to play, Division 2, Division 3 in Spain, had some tryouts. You suddenly realize you're not as good as you think you are. And then sort of did my thing. I did coaching. I coached at, different places. After I graduated, I coached at University of Mount Union. Anyhow, so my last real thing that I did was I was an assistant coach at Princeton University, and did that for 8-10 years. I can't remember. And then sort of stepped away a little bit, and I sort of got the bug again to get re-engaged, and I became a referee. And as a parent, you coaching your kids through life, and then one of my sons decided to go to school and try to play in Division 3, and didn't make the team. But it wasn't so much that he didn't make the team. What he was told really annoyed me. Really, really annoyed me. And I'm sure if the coach is watching, he would be like, whatever. But yeah. So what got me so what did I decide to do this was 3 years ago, 3 years ago.
Can you say what he said?
Well,
or paraphrase maybe.
My son, defensive midfielder, brought up to not. I hate the comparison, because then people are going to be like, "Oh, that's what he was," and like plays like Busquets, right? Like fit, right? Is his big thing is about distributing the ball, and he was told that was not enough. And I was like, it's not enough. It's like the guy doesn't miss it. Like, again, because it's my son, there's some implications to that. But it's like, there's a kid who could go plural games, without losing the ball. Like, he doesn't do all the fancy dribbling, but man, he'll get it to this right spot, right? So anyhow, long story short, I got annoyed. And so in year one, at 4 years ago, I watched probably 200 to 250 soccer games, Division 3 college soccer games of all levels. I think it ended up being like 125 teams, give or take. And I counted passes, because I came to this theory, like, if passing is not a big deal, then you should be able to see like where teams fall if they don't pass, if they pass a lot. And it can't come to find out, the more teams pass, the better where they were. That's the
correlation.
Correlation, right? Like, so I had all this data, and some guy on the d3boards.com, which is has college soccer, Division 3 soccer, football, basketball, said, you should put that on YouTube. And so I was like, okay. And I did this YouTube video, and I was kind of like, hey, this is kind of neat. I get to make up stuff and put it out on for people to watch. And that sort of led to this, okay, what do I do now? The season's over. This was November. And then somebody said, you should interview the national champion, the Connecticut coach who won the national championship. I had like 3 subscribers at the time. Me, my middle son, and my youngest son. And my oldest was like, Dad, this is crazy. I'm not going to subscribe. So so anyhow, so I reached out to Coach Burke at Connecticut, and I was like, dude, I don't think you're going to want to do this, but I'd love to have an interview with you and just talk about your national championship. And sure enough, he's like, yeah, I'd love to. And so he was my first video. Then I got the women's coach at Christopher Newport. And then it was just a snowball. Like, I'm not kidding you. It's been 2 years now. It's just become a snowball. And, you know, of coaches really interested when they send me stuff. Like, you can see all these scarves. These are all gifts from people. From coaches, got all the hats, like it just snowballed. And so I've just been running with it ever since. And so that's how.
I love that. That's a crazy story. And and it's kind of, there's a couple notes there that I want to touch on. I think obviously the how the first interview kind of led to the channel that you have today, I think is massive. And for those who haven't checked it out, around D3 Soccer, go check it out. It's got not just these interviews. Keep in mind, I've seen vlogs of different programs that Paul's traveled to. Checked them out, offered insights on what those have to offer physically there on campus. Different spin-off shows that have popped up outside of the interviews as well, just covering D3 Soccer. It's been great, I think, for parents, for student athletes who want to be able to say that they're knowledgeable about what the D3 landscape has to offer in general. I think it's a perfect place to start. But I also want to go back to, again, I know I asked you to paraphrase. It's totally okay. We don't have to talk about who the coach was. I think at the end of the day, though, some of that feedback, right? What year would you say this was? This was a couple of years ago?
It was 3 years ago.
So, 3 years ago, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, we can both agree the game has changed a little bit in that time.
Correct.
The modern game has evolved.
Totally.
But at that time, right, you could say that type of midfielder would be heavily prized. Someone who did not lose possession, and not just didn't lose possession, but would be able to find the right passes, not just be able to pass laterally and keep the ball for possession's sake. I feel like now, and maybe I could be wrong, maybe college soccer is more physical and more about those types of attributes than it is about the tactical knowledge and awareness that most players have to have at the professional level. But I still feel like that would be a very prized asset that most coaches wouldn't be able to really give up. And if they had the opportunity to recruit, would go a mile to bring in a player like that. I don't know. Did it, I don't know, kill the confidence or change maybe how your son wanted to play, or maybe how you coached your son?
So that's a really interesting question, because I've apologized to my oldest, who didn't make the team, to my middle son, who is a goalkeeper, who I coached as well. And even to my youngest, who I didn't get the opportunity to coach because he got roped into the soccer early on. And so I really I wasn't coaching him. I didn't have the opportunity to coach him as much. So I've apologized to them, because I have some very distinct ideas about how the game should be played. And in spite of all of the changes and sort of the evolution of the game and what it looks like now, I still hold to my beliefs. Some things may have changed, right? Like, but I think fundamentally, possession is a core competency that you must have if you want to win. And I'm not saying win the off game, they're a much better team, so how do you beat these guys? I'm saying consistently at a level, you have to be able to maintain possession with intelligence to basically be at that level. In the case of my son, part of the problem was that I was down there. We drove him down, did the whole parent thing, dropped him off. I actually watched the tryout. This is the part where I think I lost it, right? Like this is where, man, if you would have stayed for a couple more, maybe you would have seen something different or whatever. But I watched the first day of tryouts. And he was by far the most technical player out there. Like by far, in terms of what he does with the ball and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then the end result being the end result. And so that just sort of led me to this idea. And I always ask the question fundamentally, does possession matter? Does passing matter? Do corner kicks matter? The answer is no. But hey, throw-ins, are throw-ins important? Yes. So I question these things all the time, and I have yet to find a better model where if you want to be an elite team, you want to be, let's just say, in the top of the top consistently, above all else, possession is going to be fundamental to that.
I agree wholeheartly.
Yeah,
And
right.
I think you and I have talked about this a little bit, even off camera, right? I mean, you and I are both avid fans of FC Barcelona, and,
Yep.
and you having come up through now learning more about your journey, right? Having come up through Spain, I think, and having some of that technical background to an extent, you've seen firsthand what possession can really do. But I think sometimes now that I'm a parent for last, I'm only 9 months in, so no one who's listening, judge me too harshly. But I'm only 9 months in, still learning. But I get asked all the time because of my playing background, and I was never a coach. I don't think I could ever be a coach. I don't think I'm patient enough, at least not yet. But I feel as though I think about the game a certain way, kind of like you do, that there are attributes that you have to have that make you stand out as a player. And it's possible to coach those in to your kids, to your players that you're coaching, whatever it may be. But on that front, right, I get asked all the time today, am I going to have my son Enzo go through Project Mbappe, right? Have him start at the youngest age possible in order to be some world-class superstar. I don't know if it's that easy, right? I don't think it's that straightforward. But I feel as though if you had a child who was showing up to these tryouts, going to these college visits, whether they're unofficial or official, and have them attempt to stand out in a pool of players and talent, I believe, just like you do, that you could be the most physical specimen ever, but if you don't have a first touch, if you can't do basic dribbling competencies and skills, if you don't understand how your position moves on the pitch as the play moves up and down the pitch, you lack very, very core fundamentals that will be exposed when you go up against a team who is truly good, right? Is very skilled. Yeah. And so when we think about the parents who are maybe in a similar place where I am, right? Love the game, love the possession aspect of it all, feel like it is the future, but feel like equally it could be somewhat difficult to coach that or to have their child develop skills based around that idea. I don't know. What would you maybe tell those parents, right? How did you do it? What path did you take? Were there any players, personalities, or coaches that you used as an example or modeled some of the coaching that you do after? I know you're a coach yourself, but was there something that you studied or someone that you studied that just made that process of helping your sons develop a little bit easier?
Well, I think it's took me a while to get to. I think fundamentally the starting point, and again, this might be different from a lot of people, but fundamentally, if a kid doesn't have joy for the game, in whatever shape or form that comes in, right? Like they're never going to amount to anything. They end up hating the game, and it's not worth it, right? So to me, it's like, do you enjoy the game? Are you having fun? Like all those sort of things. I always talk about the joy of the game because some of my favorite moments in soccer weren't about when they were just, man, I just remember how much fun it was, right? Like if anybody's in Barcelona or watching has been to Barcelona and they've gone to Parque Güell, which is park in overlooks all of Barcelona. There's a dirt square that was there, and every Sunday or Saturday, excuse me, you would show up there and it would be pickup soccer, and it was just pickup and small little goals, like a bottle and a shirt as a goal, and those are the things I remember, and that's what sort of drove me this idea, like there has to be joy in the game that you do.
Agreed.
From a soccer perspective, I think I'm warped. Like, I'm just warped by, right, like having lived in that city and, you know, been a member and gone to games where they would win and the team would get booed because they played ugly, or right, and there was and over the years it's gotten more stringent, right, which is why guys like Pep and Xabi are like, I gotta get out of here, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're just it's too demanding, right? And justifiably so. But the part that always got me was that there was a way to play. Like, it wasn't there was a way to win, there was a way to play. And so I don't really, even coaching, I never really talked about winning, losing. I was like, I want to play, and how do you play? And sort of that, and that's what I taught that's what I taught the boys, right? Like, there is a way to play the game and to do so in the most attractive way. And again, I go back to the effectiveness, the most effective way. How do you do that? You don't lose the ball. That's the first fundamental. And whatever you do, however you don't lose the ball, there is a way in which you don't lose the ball. Do you want to retain possession for possession's sake? Or are you looking to make, you know, good passes up front so guys have something to do with it? The guys who are, you know, gazelles and can run with the ball, Mbappes of the world, let them do their thing. But they have to get the ball first. And how do you get them that ball? So, and I wouldn't say that there were, maybe it's just a personality trait. I wouldn't say like there were coaches that I was influenced by or sort of looked to, because I always like question things, right? Like, and just sort of, I'm not sure they have it right, or I'm not sure about, like, I'd always question something about it. So,
Contrarian,
yeah, total contrarian sometimes to like, just not even sometimes just because I am, you know, it's like, I got to think differently. But, you know, coaches who ran through Princeton, from Bob Bradley, Manny Shelshite, Jim Barlow, who are the three core guys there, like, these are guys who, I have to say, in adult life, really sort of got me thinking about the idea of possession and sort of how to play. And then you can't be impacted by what you watch from 2008 to 2013, right? If you're a soccer fan, you cannot be warped by 2008 to 2013, which is what Barcelona was in Spain. Were just
the greatest football or soccer we've ever watched. I don't think anybody can like I think there legitimately was a vote on this, I'm pretty sure, years ago, but I think in the culmination of all of it was 2011 was the single greatest individual team we've probably seen or ever will see. And I will agree wholeheartedly with the sentiment that you just echoed on. Winning is not as important as how you win. You know, my dad, you know, instilled. I've been a Barca fan since birth because my dad instilled that into me, and you know, good dad, great dad. And I think what he always used to mention was he would never, if he ever missed a game, which was crazy. Like he didn't miss it a ton, but if he had work, whatever the case may be, you know, we didn't have a ton when I was little, but he would always, the first thing he'd always ask me was, how did we play? Not what was the score.
What was the score?
Never asked what was the score. How did we play? He cared more about that because he knew I was watching than anything else. And the score was the cherry on top. When I described how we played for 5 minutes, and then it was, oh, we won 3-0 or 2-0, whatever it may have been. And that was always more important. It was champagne football. It wasn't Barcelona, like for example, from last season, right? The 22-23 season, where won La Liga. It's great, but there were still a very interesting sentiment. Yeah,
it was empty. I would say it's like the emptiest season I've had with them for years. Like, it just okay. And I think everybody reacted that way. Hey, great. You know, I think they were
It
more
didn't feel
excited
like
because
we
Real
won it.
Madrid didn't win. You know,
Yes.
like that was more excitement than. Yeah, it was just kind of like, yeah, okay, move on.
Yeah.
Next, see you next year. So
Agreed. And I think that that's something that, it kind of washes over us as fans a little bit, right? And it's easy to just solely, try to compete with other teams, clubs, or even look at the American soccer lens from the standpoint of trophies and just counting as many as you possibly can, which I think is is very, very flawed logic, especially if we want the sport to grow, right? I think paying attention to the technical aspect of the game and how our players are improving on that front is massive. So I think it's just something that parents at a pretty young age should dig into. I think I'm reading. I just finished a book by Tom Byer. I think I want to say.
Yeah.
Soccer starts at home.
Soccer starts at home. That's the Japan guy.
Yes, exactly. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Fantastic book read. It's a very easy read. I knocked it out in like a weekend. So if anybody is interested, it doesn't take very long. But I think the overarching message is that there's this misguided belief that kids can't start, with advanced motor skills and movement until they're 7-8 years old, and that's just a massive fallacy. We as humans, we're able to start absorbing that knowledge and trying things out as soon as we can walk. Right. So if you want your son or your daughter to pick up this sport, the soccer, in some kind of fashion, start them as early as possible, and you can do it in a number of creative ways. But I think that was really interesting, which we touched on there with your sons, and I imagine it's happened to more than a few parent families out there that just confused as hell as to why their pretty gifted child, at least from the lens of soccer, is not standing out at tryouts for one or another.
Have you the coolest thing is because you're talking about soccer starts at home. Have you ever seen those things that they're like half soccer balls? They're like hockey pucks. They're half rounded, and then the bottom half is like felt, so you can kick this ball. It's like a half ball across any surface. And so we used to have those, and that's what we would play our games in when the kids were nothing. Yeah, they're like, I forget what they're called, but that's the coolest thing.
You find a link, man, shoot it my way. I'm totally down. I think what I was going to do, my plan in all honesty was going to be, okay, grab a bunch of size ones, throw them at like 4 or 5 in each room in the house. And when we go in there together, I just start playing with it. And hopefully what I want my son to fall in love with is not the game, the formal game of soccer. I want him to just fall in love with the ball. To just treat the ball like I treated any toy when I was a baby or an infant or a toddler. I want this to be his comfort toy, if anything else, and let that evolve over time into something more if it does get there. And if it doesn't, if he only ever appreciates just watching the game, totally fine by me. I mean, that's kind of the way you have to approach it. So
like I said, we'll see. Everyone's sense of joy around the game is different, totally different, right? Like, and kids are the same way. Like, they might love the game and they might find joy in playing it. Some of them just don't operate that way and might find joy in the coaching aspects of it. You can see how the analytical side of a kid, after a while, they start to question about the game and what they look at. Yeah. So
I love that. Yeah. Well, look, I think in that entire kind of story, I think what you unpacked as an overarching kind of, topic, if you will, is why you decided to go down this path of creating content that's going to kind of open up families' eyes to not even just college soccer, but specifically D3, right? And maybe what some student athletes could be missing out there. Maybe I call it debunking some myths, right, that could exist around that part of the game. There was once upon a time where my mom and I had to navigate the entire college recruitment scene ourselves, and it's a full-time job all by itself. It really is. There's so much that goes into it, but there's so much that you must have just. I imagine you already were doing a ton of research, right? You said you sat there and kind of like counted passes video by video and game by game.
I do not recommend that exercise to anyone.
No, we're definitely not endorsing that here at Box to Box. But I will say that you obviously there's a lot that you picked up, but I'm also willing to bet that these coaches, these hundreds of interviews that you've done, have opened your eyes even to just some. Maybe just common misconceptions around what they're experiencing when they talk to parents and families and students, but at the same time that maybe you even thought about college soccer. So I want to touch on some of that today.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
there's, the space is changing all the time, I
totally.
imagine. But I don't know, what are some of the biggest myths around, let's not even say D3, but collegiate soccer as a whole? And I don't know, just talk us through some of that and the ones that you feel just aren't being talked about.
I say this about D3, but it does apply to college soccer, right? Like it gets better higher up the level. I got to be careful with that. It gets better. The top 20s are better the higher up you go. The rest I'm not too sure about, but the soccer is a lot better than what people give it credit for. I think, and that's the biggest. To me, that's the biggest thing. It's the quality of the players is a lot better. Tactically, technically, it's just so much better than what people realize. I think the misconception about college soccer is that it's just college soccer, right? And so people have this thought like, oh, you're gonna classic 1980s ball, you're just gonna launch it and you're gonna battle in the mud and you're gonna get a studs up on a knee and you're just gonna keep playing through it and all this kind of stuff. Like, it is so much better than what people realize. And I'm always amazed when I watch these games at the D3 level. A lot of teams could compete, right? Like they could definitely, because I'm wearing the hat, right? Tufts could easily play Division 2 schools, Division 1, lower end Division 1 schools, and not be played off the field. I think there's that. I think the other thing, the misconception is, and I know we talked a little bit about this, but the college soccer is not soccer in the traditional sense of everything else we have going on. It's not right to compare it to soccer in Europe or soccer elsewhere. It is completely globally, I would say college soccer, college sports in general, is as unique as it comes. There is no other place in the world that has anything remotely close to collegiate sports in the United States. Not even close. I mean, it's like college soccer in the US and then nothing everywhere else, because it's not fun. Like, that's the disparity between the two. It just does it. And again, historically, how it all emerged, right? Like, I think that's the other, I'll go down a rabbit hole on that. But I think, right, when you look at sort of why collegiate athletics is collegiate athletics in the United States and why it's so important and integral to the educational institutions and all that kind of stuff, it developed a lot differently than anywhere else in the world. There was never this idea around the universities and colleges in the rest of the world, and that avenue was pursued by clubs and professional and amateur, and again, soccer specific, right? I think so to talk college soccer, you almost have to think about it differently, right? There's a reason why it's only 3 months long, right? Because you can't no season goes the full 10 months of a college. It just doesn't work that way. There's a reason why they play 3 games in a week. It's just the way, because again, they're trying to do all this stuff in a short period of time because they have all these other sports that they're dealing with. And I don't think enough people think about that. I would say, and I think this is more of a broader discussion, so I apologize, but I think the biggest misconception about the sport in general, I think college soccer, I touched upon it a little bit, is that we're so historically, this is going to get me in trouble, like ignorant about sort of how soccer became soccer in the United States versus Europe versus Africa versus, right? And sort of all of these things that sort of led it down a path that we are now at today. And because that's hard to do, is to think about that, right? Like, no, this is so going off a tangent, but right, my latest thing, and I know we'll talk about it, but like my latest thing is, like, I don't think people realize, like, the league MLS, MLS, started in 1996. I don't know if anybody experienced. Mark Fishkin, I know, did, but I don't know if anybody else experienced what it was like between when I came back to the States in 1985 to 1996. Like you want to talk about a veritable wasteland of nothingness in terms of soccer. I played in the APSL, so I tried to be professional in the APSL. I think I made like $500 a month. I played in the NPSL playing indoor. I definitely made $500 a month, and that was professional, right? And so I have a different thinking about MLS and all this stuff, and the same thing applies to college soccer. The way it's developed and how it's developed into what it is today the story is a lot different than anywhere else, right? And I try to keep that in mind. And like I said, and I go back to what I said at the very beginning, it is so much better than what people realize. And if you drop the preconceived notions about, everybody's got to play like Barcelona or Real Madrid, otherwise it's terrible. Well, good luck, because then you're only going to watch 10 games a year because everybody else is going to suck. Am I allowed to say that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah.
So
honestly, say whatever you want.
I rambled.
Worst case scenario, I can edit out. But
all right. I rambled through a bunch of different things, but it all is part of this bigger soccer thinking thought that I go through.
No, it definitely is. It definitely is. Yeah, no apologies. I think there's a lot that you touched on there, and I think the expectations of fans is kind of the overarching sentiment as well, right? I'm not saying to pretend to understand what soccer was like in the early 90s, but I do remember watching it at the Cotton Bowl as early as 1998. Watching Ariel Graziani and Jason Christ and Oscar Pareja trying to do it for the Dallas Burn, right?
What a great time that was, right?
It really was.
It was like, you enjoy it now, right? I don't know. I might be putting words in your mouth. Maybe your dad, like, enjoy it now because it might not be here tomorrow, right? Like, it's a very survival instinct about it. But
watching Clint Mathis and the New Jersey Metro Stars come to town and just thinking like I knew even as a kid, right? This is when I was like 8-9 years old, and I'm thinking on the only comparison I can really draw, which is what I watch on television. Which again, keep in mind back then, I didn't have any access really to European soccer. Nobody really did. It was kind of like bootleg streams that weren't any kind of a high quality. And that's all you really had access to. It wasn't like the early to mid 2000s that we started actually seeing, let's call it the biggest league in the world, the Premier League, on television. And even back then, you only ever got the big games. You weren't watching Brighton play Luton Town. You were watching Arsenal versus X team, Manchester United against insert team here. It was only the teams with the biggest brands, and it was an attempt to try and grow that league globally that has now evolved to where we are today. But it's not. I think you're right. I think so many fans in the age of the internet, whether it's intentional for clicks, impressions, or anything else, or it's simply ignorance, we often compare to it's recency bias, right? Only what we've seen lately. I think that
since 2010, I think 2010 there was something went on where 2010 MLS is going to be around. EPL started. You started being able to see games, and then you could do La Liga and all this stuff. And I think it started then. And
I mean, realistically, you could probably attach it to like David Beckham's arrival.
You
probably could because like, you ride the 07, and you can make that argument that
that's fair.
he forces fans who didn't consider soccer at all. Really, they're more mainstream sports fans to start paying attention to why this guy was considered to be a Hollywood A-lister wherever he went in America, right? So it forces you to start like, and of course the Adidas commercials, you combine Reggie Bush and David Beckham. All of those, that cultural mesh that kind of happened, right? I think, but even with that, we still are at a point, right, where there's still all of this conflicting information, not just around college soccer, but around professional and what this game in America should look like, and why haven't we reached it yet, even though we're still technically, at least from my standpoint, and I'm willing to bet your standpoint as well, we're still kind of in our infancy with it, right? And this is I'm going to keep playing into this tangent that you went off of, because I think it's a good conversation to have. You know, we've talked a little bit about some of the content you create and why you create it, but I think, you know, over time, disagree with me if you'd like, but I feel like it's evolved to a point where you are now sharing more soccer-based opinions on the internet, as we all are, even
Correct.
outside of the realm of the content that we create. And, you know, I think with especially with maybe North American fans, but I think I see this in Europe too, there's sometimes this need that we feel as humans to sometimes create an echo chamber, right? To create
Oh, totally.
a funnel of opinions that just simply agree with us, whether it's for the dopamine that we feel when we get a like or a follow or a subscription, whatever it may be. I think sometimes we just do that inherently without even thinking about it. And what it leads to is some very conflicting conversations on the internet around things like pro rel, around things like what that could evolve into. Can that lead us to the culture that we see overseas? Maybe we should look at other avenues like college football, for instance, right? No one really has the right answer. But from your standpoint and what you've seen, because I'll be honest, for those who haven't seen on the timeline, I know I've seen it more than a few times, but I've seen accounts like 343 block you on Twitter. I've seen people have seen me get into arguments with like some of the pro rel community. I get the guys like Ted Westervelt, for example. I mean, there's so many of these personalities out there, right? That they seem to have the key to fixing this game in North America. What's that been like for you? Just kind of for those who aren't fully aware, walk us through just some of that.
All right. So, I mean, I think, let me just start. The focus of my channel for the most part is Division III soccer, college soccer, right? Like, so I'm nobody, you know, like I do my thing and I'm okay. But again, soccer is soccer. So I will say this because it cracks me up. Like University of Rochester, paywall, right? Like you have to pay to watch their games. The women's team has blocked me on Twitter.
Really?
I call them the University of Paywall. It just kind of like it is what it is. So 343, I don't even know what I did, but I clearly disagree with him fundamentally about sort of how the game has evolved and all this stuff. And I've sort of gotten back and forth. And then I'm blocked there as well, which I find it absolutely comedic because to your point, you're right. People just like the echo chamber. The echo chamber is a lot more comfortable. The echo chamber is like being in your mother's womb, right? There is nothing better, right? You're being, you know, like you're being fed, you're warm, you know, you're protected, all these, right? It's the same.
No problems in the world.
Yeah, no problems in the world, right? And that's not I wasn't brought up that way, right? Like, again, I deal with stuff like you got to be honest about the game. I tell my kids, like, if you want hugs and happiness around the game, you probably don't want to ask me how I played because I'm going to tell you how I think you played. And that might not be what you want to hear. So, right. Like, so to me, it's all about debate and understanding. And so I get into these things not because I'm trying to be a jerk or I'm trying to, you know, not like what you do or whatever. Like you have your own opinions. I just want to test those opinions, right? Fundamentally, are your opinions strong enough? And clearly some people prefer not to be tested and just want to be blocked. So the blocking feature and in Exeter is the whole reason why was created. So which is fine, whatever. The Ted Westervelt thing is funny, I think, because you know he's like this pro rel guy, and I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. And I guess I'm some MLS nut job guy supporter that he won't even accept. I offered to debate. I said, hey, I'd love to just sort of have you on the channel. We'll talk about it, and like whatever. No, you're just a pawn in this big evil conspiracy that is MLS. I'm like. Dude, do you look at
MLS like must be paying you? Yeah, under the table.
Totally,
you must have a check coming.
Totally, weekly. So anyhow, you know what? Like again, I have opinions about the game, and they may be right, they may be wrong, and the only way I know if they're going to be right is if they could stand the withering assault by somebody who disagrees, right? Like, and so that's sort of my. And if somebody wants to block me, like whatever. the pro promotion relegation thing, just because you brought it up and I didn't, is fundamentally a scam, right? Like fundamentally promotion and relegation to make it work the way the EPL does. All you're doing is you're taking money from the top. And again, we can have that discussion. I don't mind talking about that and about how ways Major League Soccer or US soccer can support these other clubs. But the only reason why anybody supports that is because we have a deplorable history of teams coming and going in the soccer landscape. It's not like there's any permanence to any of these things. So the only way to create permanence, is if you artificially keep them alive. Well, frankly, I don't want to keep a Rhode Island, I forget their name already, Rhode Island something alive, right? Using resources that may be able to go somewhere else if they're only drawing 100 people a game, right? Like, that's not the idea behind promotion and relegation, right? Please. So I used to really got me ranting now because I'm working on.
I love it. I love it. I think this is all part of it, right? I think it makes up who you are, right? As a creator, as a fan of the game. Yeah. These are tough conversations for a lot of fans to have. Yeah. And part of it is because of what you just said, right? The echo chamber just creates this idea that anyone who doesn't agree with me is just being toxic on the internet. It's easier to not have to deal with it, hit block.
Yep.
Whereas, like, I think why not have these conversations if we are, in fact, in the pursuit of what we say we are, which is growing the game to a point that's maybe not mirrors the culture overseas, right? But at least is relatively comparable for the scale that we're at, which is, again, you mentioned, we're not even 30 years into this thing yet. So, we're still
like, again, and I think I have to run to the bank here tomorrow because I have to cash in my MLS check. But let's be real. I mean, here's the interesting thing. Again, I have so much data in my head, it's ugly, but MLS in 30 years is the most successful soccer league in US history, period, bar none, end of discussion. And there are 50 data points to point to that it's not even comparable. So what are we arguing about? Like, now you're arguing about structure within US soccer. I don't give two bleeps about the structure of US soccer. I just like to watch a good soccer game, right? Like, maybe that's where I differ with people, is like, man, I don't care the level, to be honest with you. I'll watch any game. Like, I just like to watch a game.
Mm-hmm.
Is that so bad?
No,
apparently
not.
So. Apparently.
Oh, yeah. It maybe depends on who you ask, right? But I think the purpose of today's conversation, I think, no, man, that's I think where most fans are to an extent. And I'll be honest, like, I think, I like to entertain both sides of that conversation. I think it's important to do it. But I really don't stand on either side. And I feel like a lot of fans are with me simply because it's like, this is what we have now. What are we complaining for? Like, we have a strong opportunity to still support soccer in this country. Why am I fighting that as a fan of the game who wants to see that grow? And I understand that we can always do better. I'm not suggesting that we don't challenge what's in front of us, right?
Totally agree.
But at the same time, it's almost like in some ways you don't bite the hand that feeds you type of scenario, where it's like, like you mentioned, Major League Soccer, despite the challenges that come with growing the sport in this country, have created something that, from some standpoints and some lenses, is successful, is creating and drawing interest beyond the truly diehard fans in this country, which, again, are the minority. The majority of the fans sports fans just don't know it exists or don't care.
Right.
So I think that, there's a lot of good that can be sort of touched on or pointed to, that I think much of this very, very pro rel community, if that's a thing, is choosing to ignore because it doesn't play into their agenda. And I think that, look, I mean, have the agenda, and it's totally okay. But I think they say more than they think they do by just choosing to block anyone that doesn't outright agree with them. And you know, like I
Come
said,
on, that's a badge. Like I carry like a badge of honor. Hey, that's awesome.
yeah, I got a block. Look, guys,
Jose,
we're
can you
all,
block me just so I can feel good about myself? Like, hey, you blocked me.
I love that. No, I think I might send the wrong message if I block you. You know, I think you know, there's a lot of those guys out there. And look, I'm not coming on to show to gripe about them per se, but I think if they want to seem as high IQ or as high ball knowledge as they think that they seem like on the internet, it's in their best interest to have the hard conversations, because no one out there is really having them. And if you really want to push your agenda along and make us all feel a little more educated, someone has to have them, right? And that's kind of where we are.
And I'm okay with all, like, look, you're talking to a guy, like, I wanted to start, I remember back in the day, I knew Peter Wilt, right? Like I used to write, and I didn't talk about this, but I used to write for internetsoccer.com, and sort of that's sort of how it developed in my MLS, my interest in MLS. And I got to meet Peter Wilt, and for a while I was talking about how would we write something? How would we create something around culture and the culture of soccer? Because I think, and this goes fundamentally, I think people think like the soccer in the US is sterile, antiseptic, whatever, you know, corporatized, say what you will, right? Like, and I think the pro rel folks see something that happens in England and say, oh, look at what happens there, promotion, relegation. These people love their teams and their clubs, and they wear it on their tattoos and all this stuff. And that's why we should do pro rel, not why, but one of the reasons. And I'm like, I already see that, right? It's just different. We're in a different space than what is in England or what is in France or Spain or whatever. And I see a big soccer culture, and part of it is just because I'm knee deep in it, right? So you see it because of the proximity, but there's so much more that goes on that I think the folks who sort of not blindly, but have this position like pro rel, otherwise MLS is this entity and US soccer is in cahoots and all this stuff. Like you just miss out on so much. And I've spent years missing out on a lot of things. And so I'm more in tune to paying attention and being present when I can. It just because it makes everything so much more worthwhile. But before I go down another rabbit hole.
No, I think that's a good point you just made, right? It's like, and also I think the other side of that, or maybe additional point to make to what you just said, is that there's for a problem, if there is a quote unquote problem, right? If we're gonna sit there and say, okay, this is a problem, and how massive and widespread they feel it really is, that pro rel community, there's no way that, because I think the argument, like you just mentioned, the arguments that they carry quite a bit is that from a culture standpoint, pro rel would fix everything.
Yeah.
And I can't think of a single problem culturally as big as this one that can be fixed by one singular line item. I don't think it's that. Nothing is ever that black and white. No. There are multiple variables at play, and which means that it's going to, you know, need a very complex solution, or simply, if there is a simple aspect to it, just time. More of what we're doing today and scaling over a long period of time, it compounds, right?
Yeah.
From your standpoint and everything you've experienced, both as a fan, a parent, a coach, outside of pro rel, is there anything that we can be doing maybe as a country when it comes to this sport that can take it to the next level, right? Or is it what I just mentioned before, just more of the same?
It's a good question. And I get the whole, I'm sure a lot of people would answer, oh, the media, especially after what we're recording this the day after the Super Bowl 58. Like after that, oh, why isn't MLS Cup like Super Bowl and all this
a spectacle?
A spectacle, right? And I, to a certain extent, I'm running a little bit counter to that. And I think what you do and Mark Fishkin and all these guys do, to my 2 cents worth, like, I think you need guys to normalize the sport in such a way that it's like everyday life, right? As bizarre as that might sound. Like, so I talk about the game. I don't talk about the intrinsic problems inherent in the game and structurally, why isn't the imagine if I just said, oh, why isn't the NCAA on the calendar? I'm not going to support college soccer until the NCAA fixes it. I would miss out on all this, right? And I think a lot. The great thing about Goals TV is just the fact that there are so many people who are going out there and treating it like this is normal to them. My D3 love of D3 is normal to me. Your support of the game, that's normal to you, and I think people need to experience that, because quite honestly, we've been doing that since 1996, right? I got started running for internet soccer not because I thought, oh, I can do this for a profession. I did it because no one else was. Right? There was no, like, you had the Grant Wall, you had like a handful of guys, and that was it. And so you just filled the gap. And I think the more people who can talk about the game, again, this is part of my life. Like, I don't apologize for being a soccer fan first. And did I watch the Super Bowl? I watched a half, like it doesn't, and I think we need more of that. And I think we need more people coming out and talking about the game. And I think, again, that captures into the roots and the fundamentals of the game that is in other countries that, again, we have to do on our own. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but that's sort of my thinking these days.
Yeah, I don't think there is a quote unquote right answer. I do think, though, that I'm inclined to really agree. I think I'll be honest, as much as I say that, it requires a solution with a ton of variables, and it's not just one thing. What you just mentioned, normalizing the game, making it more relatable to those who just don't see the beauty of it yet, and I will emphasize yet. I think that it just takes, us who have been in this game maybe for whatever amount of time, who've appreciated it for longer than the average sports fan, to just find a way to translate it to everyday life the way that we were brought to it, right? So I'll be honest too. I think I've been one of those people at times. I think only at certain points where I feel like I'm fed up with some aspect of how political the game can get, how a certain bleeds into things that just make me frustrated.
How
culturally.
It's disgusting that Qatar wins the World Cup.
Yeah, sports washing or anything else, right? It's like there are certain topics I think are hard for me to avoid, and it's hard for me not to go down some of those rabbit holes. But at the same time, right? I feel like what you just suggested is so simple, right? To an extent, it's like it's a fantastic starting point for us to go off of. And if we just have these conversations, who knows what doors it opens mentally for many fans out there, and who knows what conversations we can have that can lead to other fans discovering this game in just unique and interesting ways. The internet's getting bigger and wider every single day, and I like to think that if we don't talk about it, somebody will. But that's not guaranteed with soccer. We've seen that already, right? If we don't talk about it, it just may not get talked about. And that's something that is kind of scary.
That's why I love, like, your latest, I don't know how to say this, but like your latest announcement with the USL, right? Like, that to me is more significant than the fact that there's no promotion and relegation. I saw that and I was like, it's about time, right? Like, seriously, like, if we want to get to a point, this, I guess, broader point, but if we want to get to a point where we can entertain the simple notion of promotion and relegation, it's not the MLS teams I'm worried about. It's the USL and it's the USL 2. And then, you sort of go down the ladder, right? Or the whatever we call a pyramid or whatever it is these days. That's where I think, like, we need the most work, and that's the ones that are tightest to the community. So what can you do to make that normal for a community, so that, like again, I could point to England, like in England, some 4th division team can have 10,000 people show up for a regular season game that's not going to amount to a hill of beans. Like, that to me is much more fundamental to the game itself. And right now we don't have that. We have MLS and maybe some USL teams, but then beyond that, it is like I said before, it is a wasteland of dead soccer. Like, I don't know how else to say it, right? Like, and again, data is my thing sometimes, and I looked at all, they always tout the 160 teams that have been crushed by the soccer pyramid, the murder pyramid or whatever. And you look, and half of them are just sort of, I call them irrelevant. Like, you've lacked relevance in your community. And that's usually the telltale sign is, well, okay, then what's your attendance? And you look, what's your attendance like? Oh, you had 250 people when you won the national championship. Okay. Like, you're relevant. It's, yeah. Anyhow, I could go. That's
no. I mean, it's like I said, these are great conversations to have, and I feel like even on this show, and anybody who's tuning in can almost fact check me on this, but I feel like we rarely have these talks. When we think about where the game is actually going, and almost everything we do here, not just at Box to Box, but GOLZtv, it's all. It's almost always taken from a lens of like, what more can the media do, or the other side, what more can the fans do, and it's like. We never really have structured conversations around what's already working, what are we doing well, how do we double down on that, and appreciate it, because if it is gone, what is the path to success, right? I think it's our last chance so easy.
In 100 years. Like, if MLS were to somehow tomorrow be like, well, everybody doesn't like us, theoretically, like, we're gone. We're in a dark place for the next 100 years, right? Because the level of financial commitment that these folks, again, having worked through the league and talked to people, like the level of commitment some of these people have made, like, you don't get soccer stadiums built for nothing. Like, that doesn't work that way. You don't hire clubs and players. Like, it doesn't just happen. And anybody who thinks that they're only spending $5 million on a salary cap, I mean, they're smoking stuff, right? Like, I mean, like, it doesn't work that way. And we might not like how that happens, but right, if it goes away, USL isn't going to fill the void. The void's going to be a void.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why that partnership that we have with the championship is so massive. I think for me personally, I feel like a huge win. But I think from a GOLZtv perspective, we're obviously going to continue to scale that partnership up and give them hopefully more awareness, more visibility, and just align our brands on a unique mission of growing the game. I don't want to tease this too much, but we have a specific club partnership that we're going to announce later this month that I'm really excited about. But
that's huge.
I appreciate that, and I think it's
that's
something
the relevance. That is total about relevance, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I think lower league soccer is something that is a path to success that not many have considered. But I think it's unique, and it's unlike anything that what most fans would consider to be, if there is a such thing as mainstream soccer in this country today. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually, I think, for anyone who has a problem with Major League Soccer, and you can gripe about Don Garber or how much power he has with the board or the council of U.S.
That's
Soccer.
the latest. That's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, look, I get it, right? If you're so pro Open Cup, which again, I don't know how many of us actually exist out there, because I remember seeing plenty of U.S. Open Cup matches that were not getting filled, right? The stadiums are pretty empty. I don't know how big that crowd is, right? But if you are that person, and you kind of came out of the woodwork to complain about that, I would love to see you in the 2024 season be very adamantly passionate about USL and the lower league sides that are playing week in and week out. And I'll be honest, as well as I do, playing good soccer.
Yeah. That's
crazy.
Yeah. I'm with you. Like I said, I think the most of the work, all of the work, is at the lower leagues, and I think again it's just fighting for relevance. I think MLS is going to be perfectly fine. I think the lower leagues is where you really have to. That's where the battleground is for me, because if you could think about it, right? Like, if you could get a USL, whatever the Division 2 is, let's say you could get that consistent and steady, and not guy comes in, guy comes out. Like, you can sort of have some consistency there. Well, then you could start to have a discussion. Wow, what would it look like? We have 30 teams in USL, 30 teams in MLS. What would a promotion and relegation? Oh, suddenly the discussion changes, right? But right now it's a crapshoot. Like, you're going to have 30 this month. Oh, we're going to have 10 different teams next year. And it's a mess. And
it is. And then you have other sides too, right? Your other, leagues, professional leagues, right? You have NISA outside the USL. You have major arena soccer league. For those who don't realize, there's also a professional futsal league in America that most probably haven't heard of. You know, there's so much soccer that's going on, but again, I think it's maybe it's just cool to talk about what Major League Soccer is doing wrong versus what they're doing right. And I think for anybody who says they're not doing anything right, you're just kidding yourself.
You're just kidding yourself. Absolutely. You know, it's funny that you said about the futsal, because when I was thinking about, until that moment came where I started, like, I'm just going to count passes because I had the personal thing going. Like, I thought about, if I was going to do a YouTube channel, what would I do? And I would be like, futsal. Like, I thought that would be cool to talk about and to do show about, but whatever.
No. I think you should. I think so I think MASL, the Major Arena Soccer League, is coming back in a pretty interesting way. You know, I know the Dallas Sidekicks here in my market have rebranded, and I love tuning in when I can. But I think futsal, I think it's the NFSL or something along those lines. That's in a really interesting way caught my attention in the last 6 months. And I've of course, anybody who's played soccer at a high level in this country, whether you're a collegiate baller or you went on to actually have a pro career in any shape or form, you know, at some point you'll probably introduce the idea of futsal to improve your technical skills and ability. I think what they're able to do with the ball and some of the matches that I've watched in late 2023 and heading into today have been crazy. And if you haven't tuned in, go check it out. It's awesome. All right.
I would say that to tune into, if you ever get a chance, if no one's watched futsal at a very, very high level, go on YouTube and watch some of the Brazilian futsal league. Some of those guys get paid serious coin, and it is amazing how they play. It is just amazing. Like,
and I would say to even like piggyback on that a little bit, if you've never touched a futsal ball, you've never played with one or held it or just bounced it off the ground. I say bounce, like try it.
Putted it off the ground.
Yeah, you have to. I don't know how hard you have to throw it for it to bounce a little bit, but the heaviest ball, and it does something to your. It challenges you technically in a way that no training session that you do today.
Correct.
And that's probably the best way that I could put that.
So you actually have to be good, right? You actually have to be good with the ball, because if you're not, power's not going to get you anywhere, nowhere. And
you're exposed
you can't physically go out there and do the things, because properly reffed futsal game, as soon as there's somebody touches somebody, is a foul, right? So it's just really great game for that.
It's one of the few avenues for soccer where if you don't have strong technical skills, you probably won't survive until you do. Like, you really you cannot rely upon your physical being to kind of move the needle in that side of the game. So and at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, if you think you're a technical baller, please go test your ability in futsal, and I guarantee that you can level up a little bit more than what you could up to this point. It's a great tool to have in your tool belt.
Totally
well, look, Paul, I think I want to get a couple more interesting takes, because I think we've already gone down this rabbit hole, right? Let's keep going. I'm totally game. When we talk about, and I'm not going to harp on ProRel, they probably already hate us up to this point, but
they're blocking you.
They're not going to be following GOLZtv after this, which is okay. I think, maybe I'll wear it as a badge of honor as you do. But I think, it's interesting. One of the missions that, and we have it on our Twitter profile, we have it somewhere on our website, I imagine, at the earliest iteration of our brand and our website, we had it everywhere. And it was, we are highly invested in making soccer cool in America. That's probably the easiest way that we could put it, to make it cool. And on that mission, I can't help but just mentally flocking to culture. And we talked about culture already a little bit on this show, but I can't help but compare it to other cultures that I would love to emulate over time. And the biggest one that I can think of right now, it's not soccer on any level. It's honestly American football. And when I think about American football, I consider it to be the most mainstream sport. You already mentioned we recorded the day after the Super Bowl. We both saw how big that was. Some NBA folks will have a problem with that. That's totally okay. Respond in the comments and let me know. But I think if I compare it to American football, there are a lot of folks out there that will argue that that soccer, I can't watch soccer because the scores aren't that great. Not the highest scoring matches, which that's a different conversation for another day. But I can easily make comparisons to American football that, kind of level the playing field. But I feel like the other complaint that I hear quite a bit is that I can't watch MLS or American soccer because I'm so invested in European soccer or football, and like there's obviously a quality gap there that I can't mentally shake. And I feel as though that's such a cop out, because if that was the case, why is college football so relevant? Why does it have this fan culture that the NFL can't even match?
No, can't even come close to.
Yeah, and so I feel as though maybe that's something that we should be going after as soccer fans, or maybe if there's a cultural a culture that we could emulate, it's that college football culture, because maybe we don't have to be the highest quality league out there. Maybe our fans just need to be as adamant about the teams and the players that we support in MLS or USL as those college football fans are for the schools they represent, the student athletes they represent. I mean, what's your take on that? Do you see any similarities?
I would actually, I'm with you on the idea that I actually think the soccer cultures that if we were, because you can never do this, right? Like the soccer cultures that I would love to emulate don't look like the NFL at all, right? They look like collegiate athletics. And because there is something fundamental about that fan culture support that looks nothing like what you see in the NFL, excluding places like Green Bay and Buffalo, right? Like where these people are so invested, and you only see that at the collegiate level. I think there has to be a proximity to the game that only in soccer that you see. The NFL doesn't allow it so much, I don't think. Whereas I think MLS does, right? I've been a huge proponent of the fact that the clubs actually, yes, they're clubs, they're not franchises. The clubs actually work with their supporters group to make sure that they're brought on board to whatever the decisioning is and all that kind of stuff. Because I think that's the supporters groups are critical to this. And you want to change the game. How do you give more power, authority to those groups to go out and get more people who would support MLS soccer? That to me is a no-brainer, right? And I'm sure, down in Dallas or Houston and all these places, you just take a look at, you just look at those guys who are absolutely 100% committed to their club, right? They're not committed to a franchise. They're committed to their club for come hell or high water. And if they don't like something, they let you know, right? I think it was Red Bulls or somebody like some point marched out of the stadium or got really quiet, right? And it's noticeable, right? So that to me is the critical element. I just wish we would focus more in on that, because those guys represent more of the college football atmosphere or the college athletics culture than I think the NFL. I don't know if that answers your question. But.
No, it does 100%. Almost like build them up, right? Can we
correct.
make those groups bigger? Can we reinforce them with better weapons to really kind of take over this country the way that I'm not a big American football guy, but I do see like College Game Day on a Saturday, and it's like, I call them random schools. So if you're a college football fan, please don't come after me too hard. But like a Tennessee versus Ole Miss
absolutely.
or whatever,
you would
right?
never know.
Yeah,
you would never know.
And they're massive cultures. I mean, it's something that they recruit the students on. If you don't fall in love with any of the academic opportunities at Tennessee, you're gonna fall in love with the tradition of going to it Rocky Top and and after games or before games and being there and being embedded into it. I mean, that's something that I feel like we don't harp on as much with this sport, and maybe because we haven't grown to that point yet. But I agree, the supporters groups are a key there.
Yeah. And like I said, and then if you get guys like, again, not so much me because of what I do, but you and some of the other folks that I see on GOLZtv, you get enough of those guys, you start to get like start to develop something, right? And it becomes a little bit bigger and a little bit more, again, mainstream, a little bit more, there's a depth. I guess that's the word. There's a depth to your passion for the game, which is, again, just as, this is why I get annoyed about the other stuff, because you're telling me your passion for the game goes as deep as the structure of, MLS or something like that. And I'm like, you're nothing, right? Like you're not, like,
No, it's true. It's true. That's
how
as far
much
as
have
it
you
goes. That's
played,
all you ever talk about.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, you need to kind of maybe reassess
So,
the priorities a little bit.
yeah. So I think, I think that's to me, again, if we want to emulate something, we should just look at college sports and what they do there. And again, again, I talk about relevance, right? And why clubs may or may not be relevant. I'm like, well, if you're looking for a relevance model, look at college athletics. I went to the University of Mount Union, big time football, right? They can have 3,000, 5,000, 8,000. University Whitewater, Wisconsin Whitewater football, 8,000 people seat stadium that they fill in every weekend, right? Like, it's there. It's just a matter of how do you tap into that, right? And I think that's the big question that, and like I said, I just think it starts with the guys who are like, bleed it, right? And we become the echo chamber, right? Like, we who have an opinion about something that may be right or wrong, but we're willing to go out on a limb, and we're not getting paid by, the mainstream guys are, they realize who butters their toast. So, you got to understand that. And we're not at a point where people could have their own opinion about things and be vocal about it. So that's what we're here for. So.
Yeah, exactly. And if for anyone who thinks that, we're kind of just talking into the wind and not really, saying anything of value, I mean, look, we're recording on the 12th of February. We're a month away from March Madness. Go watch it.
Yeah.
I guarantee that if we're able to emulate and build this sport up to a point where its fans are out and cheering for, the Loons of Minnesota United or Lexington Sporting Club or whatever it may be, right? Like that's where it's going to be. That's where it's going to happen.
And that's when it happens. That's when we can start having the discussion around, wow, what would it mean if Lexington could get promoted to whatever, right? Like, I think that becomes real. Right now, to me, it's like like a this is my politics maybe, but some communist redistribution of wealth, because wealthy people have it and these other clubs don't. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. So
I agree. Lastly, can soccer be a top 2, top 3 sport in this country?
I think it already is. Just it comes in 50 different shades of yellow, right? Like like you have, seriously, I don't know if it's been done before. Like, has anybody sort of looked on the aggregate? There is
a for soccer, I believe it's called like a census report. The last one was produced at least a year ago, where they aggregate data on the total, like basically who is the American fan. They profile the American soccer fan, and they aggregate data that represents the fan base from a number of angles. And one of those that is included is it breaks out who the fan base supports by, let's say, the top 5 leagues, right?
Yeah.
And MLS is maybe third or fourth. So that I think for those who believe that MLS is what needs to be built up in order for soccer to grow, there's already a pretty avid fan base who supports leagues very adamantly outside of Major League Soccer. Go ahead.
Well, no, what I was saying is, you were just saying, oh, could it be a top 1 or top 2? And I'm just saying, like, it's just, there's so much that means to be a soccer fan, right? Like, I'm actually looking behind me. I don't have much. I do have my MLS media game player of the year there, but otherwise I don't have any MLS stuff. But I have a Barcelona. So if somebody asked me, like, I would like to know if you're are you a soccer fan? Yes. What do you support, or who do you support? Okay, that's Barcelona. Right. if you did that number in aggregate in the United States, I bet you would find a lot more fans of the game.
Yeah,
And
I think so too.
That might put us at number 3. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, hypothetically, does all of that in aggregate? Maybe.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So again, that report that I referenced, it profiles the fan base, but I think, it doesn't draw a ton of aggregate data comparisons to the other mainstream sports, right? So there's still a lot of that has to be kind of flushed out, and a team way smarter than me has to go about, kind of comparing all of those. But I think at the end of the day,
and I'll butcher it. I know, because I sort of do that.
Yeah, but it's a conversation worth having.
Yeah. I think it is. I totally think it is. Now, does MLS, as I've said this all along, can MLS be a top 1, 2, 3 in the U.S.? Frankly, I don't necessarily care. Like, to me, it's like, I just want the best possible league around. Does it have to be? Does MLS Cup have to look like the Super Bowl? I hope not. Like, I just want I want good soccer. So. But if we're saying, is it bigger than NFL? Not in my lifetime, right? Like, do I think it can overtake baseball? Absolutely. Do I think it can overtake the NHL? I don't know. It's just so many teams, and it's like that's a little bit like college sports in my warped mind. Like, it seems like that a little bit. So I don't know.
It's almost like, too, and then again, just kind of put a bow on this. It almost is like you have to ask yourself from what lens, right? Viewership perspective,
totally.
Attendance, revenue, like, what lens are we looking at it from? So it's a question that in some form or fashion I often ask on this show, because I feel like, it's a question that not many people do ask, even of themselves. But again, tough conversations I think that we need to have, not just here on Box to Box and GOLZtv, but just in general, if we are all as invested as growing the sport as we say that we are, right? So look, Paul, I think at the end of the day, we could sit here and have a conversation for hours on end. I really do feel that way. I think at some point, though, right, what I want to do is kind of bring you back, especially when we're in the middle of the college season, as busy as you might be. I think we need to do a deep dive on why college soccer is just this untapped opportunity. I really feel like, even watching, I think I tweeted about this during the tournament. It's amazing to me that ESPN, with the rights that they have, doesn't care to promote any of the content that they have access to, any of the matches. I'm sitting there watching Marshall go down in the quarterfinals, and no one's talking about it, right? Number 1 team in the country. And that's at a D1 level, right? There's still plenty of D2, D3 soccer that isn't being talked about. And I think when you have the rights to those matches, as big as they are to the student bodies or to the faculty or any fans of those institutions, you almost have this responsibility to put it on as big of a map as you possibly can. And I feel like that they're really dropping the ball there, maybe because they just have rights to other professional leagues. But I really want to kind of make create an episode solely dedicated to that, because I got a feeling, and this is probably a little bit of a teaser, I got a feeling that here at GOLZtv, we're going to start really prioritizing college soccer in a big way. I think that it's something that the fans should be paying attention to. But look, we've already been here for about 90 minutes. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Like I said, we could be here for hours. Before I let you go, though, Paul, aka SimpleCoach, is there anything else you want to give a shout out to? And if not, where can the fans find you?
Well, they can find me at SimpleCoach TV on YouTube. I have, just because of where we're at, I built a website in the fall where they could go to d3soccer.fans. That is sort of my own creation. So, but it's got a message board there, just to sort of have some more interesting conversations. I would just give a shout out. The guys know who they are. There's a handful of really hardcore D3 guys. Cooper, you got Paul Newman. I mean, these are guys who know who they are, that have been instrumental in sort of how I've gotten to this spot of creating D3 content. So just a real shout out to those guys. So.
Love it. And look, and for everybody who's tuned into this part of the episode, we're going to link all of those down below in the description. So go check those out. Especially if you've been searching for just college soccer content on the internet to stay informative, or maybe you're on your recruitment journey, whatever it may be. Go check out Paul's channel, SimpleCoach TV. A lot there to unpack. And then, as you mentioned, right, D3soccer.fans message board there, so that if you are one of those angry fans, I mean, by all means, I guess, right? Go for it. Because I think he's used to it anyway.
I won't block you. I promise. I promise.
But look, I think today this was a fantastic show. I think we had some great conversations that others just aren't having. And look, I got a feeling, guys, that you're going to see SimpleCoach on the pod again here very soon, especially when we get back into the college season.
Definitely.
But again, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it. Can't thank you enough for being on the show. And again, for everybody who tuned in, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't done so already, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're having conversations around growing the beautiful game stateside as many times as we could possibly have them. Every layer of free support goes a very long way. So for everybody here at GOLZtv and Box to Box, my name's Jose. That's Paul. We'll catch you guys next time.